Summit gets underway to come up with ways to battle Islamic extremists. President Obama clarified the White House's stance and specific language used in that battle. Joining us this morning with his reaction is freshman Republican Congressman Gary Palmer of Alabama. And I need to call you Gary because I know you don't like to be called Congressman necessarily. And you got out of the cold of D.C. only to come back home to it. So
yeah, I thought I was doing myself a favor getting out of town, and it's what, 14 degrees here?
It's cold enough, that's for sure. All right, but let's get to the speech now. The president maintains the reason they do not want to call it a war against Islam, or say the term Islamic terrorist, is because it plays into the propaganda by ISIL or ISIS, if you will, used to reach new members and recruit new members. So, but why else do you think he's taking this approach?
Well, it's hard to say. It's been one of the most frustrating things for us in Congress because there just doesn't seem to be a focus on who the enemy is. And, you know, Jordan doesn't have a problem with identifying these people as fanatics and outside their faith, really. Mm-hmm. Egypt doesn't have a problem with it. I think the rest of the world is waking up to the fact that these are Islamic extremists. It just seems that the White House is going to be the last one to recognize that. And it's going to make it very difficult to prosecute a war strategy against them if we do not accurately define what they are.
Well, I know the argument by supporters of the White House approach and the State Department's approach is that we've used other methods in the past where we have rooted out these terrorist cells, we have killed terrorists before, and it hasn't really solved the problem. So some are asking, you know, maybe a new approach is needed. Obviously, I'm thinking you disagree.
Well, I think in one sense that a new approach is needed because where we were dealing with Al-Qaeda, for instance, those were cells. This is an armed force on the ground. This is not groups spread all over the world. This is an armed force on the ground that's prosecuting a war. And at one point, a multi-front war. They had invaded Iraq. They were threatening Turkey. They'd taken over a good part of Syria. So I think in that respect, we do need to have a different approach.
And obviously Libya is a huge concern right now as well.
We're in Libya now.
All right, now on that, following up on that, if my math is correct, I think we're 8 days away from the Department of Homeland Security not being fully funded. I know that the House passed a bill that would appropriate all the funding except for them carrying out the President's executive order on immigration. Now, we know a federal judge has obviously blocked that executive action on immigration, but Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says, you know, look, we're not going to have a government shutdown. So where are we now? What are we going to have right now in that situation?
We've already funded the government through the year. The only department that will not be funded after the 27th is the Department of Homeland Security. And the funding bill that the House passed will fund Homeland Security entirely. The only thing about the House version of the bill is it denies funding for the President to process approximately 5 million illegals. What the judge did in Texas is taken that off the table. He's put a stay on it. Jay Johnson, the head of Homeland Security, has said that they're not engaging in that work right now, so there's really nothing to fund. And my attitude about it is, and I said this a couple of days ago, is that the Senate needs to pass the House bill. It fully funds Department of Homeland Security. There's no reason to shut down the department.
With that one exception.
With that one exception.
All right, on that note, Ruben Navarrete, he writes for the Washington Post, and talking about Republicans, he's saying they're ignoring the elephant in the room. I want to read this quote real quick from that. He says, I never heard them say a word about employers who hire them to do jobs that Texans, he's from Texas, that Texans won't do, such as tarring roofs in 100-degree weather or cleaning windows on skyscrapers. Now, again, that's the argument he's making. That's not mine. I'm just presenting it from the other side from that question. But what his point is that Republicans talk about the loss of jobs that some of the illegals are getting, but a lot of these are jobs that many Americans aren't lining up to take. Do you agree with that?
That's not the issue. Okay. That is another Democratic ploy to change the subject. The subject's not immigration. The subject is abuse of executive power. That's the whole point of the bill that the House passed, is that we say that the President acted unconstitutionally, and that we're not going to provide the funding for him to carry out this unconstitutional act. It has nothing to do with the immigration issue. That just happens to be the focus. But the issue here is an unconstitutional act.
All right, Gary Palmer, Congressman out of Alabama, we appreciate your time. Thank you for coming in.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, we have entertainment news after the break. Stick around.